No, I'm not one of those easy mode gamers who's here to say, oh, Dark Souls is too hard. It's as hard as the Elden Ring DLC. I can't play it. I'm going to give this a negative review. And I'm not also the type of person who's here to spit roast Dark Souls 2 and say, it's the worst in the series. I fucking hate it. Because I don't think so. I actually gave Dark Souls 2 when I finished the series. It's on my main channel if anyone wants to. Shameless plug, I know. But I gave it the same score as I did Dark Souls 1. And I know people are going to come out with the pitchforks and be like, how dare you? It's not the same. Dark Souls 1's a masterpiece and Dark Souls 2's a piece of shit. I didn't think so. I thought Dark Souls 1 was an incredible game, and I can't believe I've never played it until a few months ago. But it does have a lot of issues. The most notable, and I'm not here to talk about it, but I'll say one thing that I really didn't like about it, was bonfires. The fact that you couldn't teleport from bonfire to bonfire straight off rip was a massive no-no for me. And again, this isn't something I'm going to go into because I've ranted about this a bazillion times, but just to touch on it lightly, no one has yet given me a good enough reason to why boss runs are a thing. I think they are extremely stupid and there to completely just waste someone's time. The only two reasonable things I've seen people say, and I still think they're a bunch of baloney, is one, you can farm whatever enemies you're going up against so you could get souls to make the boss a lot easier. And two, it's all about conviction. It's all about how bad you want it. Do you want to beat that boss bad enough to where you run back to him every time? Yes, I do want it that bad. But no, I don't want to spend fucking 2-3 minutes walking back to the boss, potentially even dying, then spending 6 minutes to try and run back to him, to then die because I've forgotten his moveset. Anyway, that's not the point. Dark Souls 2 remedied a lot of things bad with Dark Souls 1, which is why I gave it a similar score. So why am I ranting about Dark Souls 2 and not Dark Souls 1? Because Dark Souls 2, even though it did a lot of things right, at the end of the game, like towards the end, it just spat it right back in your face and said, you know what, actually, we're actually not going to do that. It just suffered the same way you did in Dark Souls 1. So let me go through bit by bit. First of all, bonfires. Like I said, in Dark Souls 1, you can't teleport straight off rip. You have to go through like 3/4 of the game before the game goes, yeah, you know what, you can teleport. You actually have to run around the whole map. Dark Souls 2, instantly, you can teleport wherever you want as soon as you want. Saves us a whole lot of time and saves us a whole lot of hassle running back and forth from place to place. The other thing that they did, which I didn't like about Dark Souls 1, like I said, is boss runs. If you explore around enough, there will be a bonfire right next to a boss, at least for a majority of bosses. And when I found that out, which was like halfway through the game, I was like, oh, you know what? That's actually really cool. If someone actually takes the time to search around the map and everything, they'll be able to find these bonfires. Now, there's two places that I had a huge issue with this mechanic. The first one was the Black Clutch, I can never remember the name, the place with all the poisons and stuff. They actually put a bonfire right next to the boss's arena, but the reason I had an issue with this is because, one, that place is completely littered with mobs, with, what are they called? Invaders. Not only that, the place where the bonfire is literally in the tiniest alleyway at the corner of the map, in an area where it is dark as all shit. It would be almost impossible to find it unless you're literally like sniffing every single crevice of the map. So for majority of people, I'm assuming they didn't find it, and it was a very frustrating place for them. I don't mind if you put it like around a corner, if you're like hugging the walls or something like that. But if you see a place where there's a ledge and a wall, you're more than likely just not going to go around that area because you're not going to think that there's a bonfire there. So that was one of my issues. The second issue was to get one of the great souls against, I can't remember the names of anything, the big dragon like towards the end of the game. So there's this big castle and the big dragon at the end. This place didn't give you a bonfire right next to the boss. And there's a few issues with this. One, a lot of people said that the boss was really hard. I didn't find him very hard, but it might have been because Magic Build hard counter the dragon. I've never used a Magic Build before. This is my first time ever using Magic Build. But it seems alright in the game, and it seemed to do very well against him because I did him like in the first 4 or 5 tries. But the issue with not having the bonfire there is not only if you don't have a Magic Build will you probably struggle with him because apparently he's very, very hard, and fighting against him when he's doing the fucking flamethrower attack, which is super hard to dodge, especially when you're doing stuff at range like I did. It was already hard enough to dodge, so you have to die, run all the way back to the castle against a horde of enemies. And this is also a stupid thing that I found out against the Sentinels, because I had a different bonfire to the one that was actually closer, is that when you open a door in the game, it shuts immediately. And there's 2 doors that do that are extremely annoying, because when you're trying to run back to the boss, you actively have to kill every enemy in the area for you to even make it to the boss, or you just have to get really lucky and hope that they don't hit you until you get iframes going through the fog. And then I kind of touched on the third point there. There's a stupid amount of enemies, like extremely stupid, and they place them right next to the boss area. So like I said, if you're just doing what I really enjoyed when I found this out the first time playing Souls games, is you can just run past enemies and go to the boss. You don't have to. Bloodborne did this great. Dark Souls 1, I believe, did this really, really good. I don't know about Dark Souls 3, but for the most part, if you don't want to fight them, you don't have to. But this game insists on you fighting every single mob in the game, especially that one, because if you don't, there's a probably 10% chance that you could run by all of them, get to the fog just before you get iframes, and you could just walk in. If not, you're gonna have to fight. I'm eyeballing it here. You have to fight 15 NPCs to make it even possible to run to the boss. Another area that did this is Iron Keep. Iron Keep was extremely frustrating for me because, like I said, you can't run to the boss. Not only is there enemies there that literally run at you at top speed. They're so fucking quick and they do a lot of damage, but there's a million of them. They aggro from fucking Russia, and there's one mob that uses a bow and arrow and can switch to a, what's it called? A sword right in front of the boss. I'm not even joking, literally like 2 centimeters in front of the boss. So if you want to go to that boss, you have to clear out at least 60% of that area. And I know you guys are thinking, oh, clearing out isn't that bad. But in Dark Souls 2, you have to defeat every enemy 7 times before they stop despawning. It is completely absurd. The other issue I had with the game was Vendrick. Now, for the most part, Vendrick isn't a hard boss. You can pretty much just dodge his moves very easily. But he has a very strange mechanic where the harder he is depends on how many giant souls you consume. Now, at no point in the game, I'm pretty sure at least, and I've listened to every NPC's dialogue, the only thing I don't do is actually do the big text for every item. I read just a small print of every item. Nowhere in the game does it say you should not consume the giant souls. And what happens if you consume the giant souls? So there's a multiplier for Vendrick. So if you have 5 giant souls, he's just base damage, base health, base everything. For every soul you consume, I believe, the first one you consume, he's 16 times as strong. If you consume 2 souls, he's 32 times as strong. Or if you just don't have them in your inventory, they're 32 times as strong. And it keeps doubling. Now, why is that annoying? Because the game doesn't tell you. And when you eventually go to fight him, and he's insanely strong, majority of new players, like me, and luckily I just got told by someone, you're just going to think that this guy is completely impossible, and at no point in the game did the game tell you this. So I had to go in and fight him with, I think, 4 great souls. And again, the game also doesn't tell you where to get them, and they're literally in the most... Like I said, the dragon guy, you wouldn't even think about trying to hit him to fight him to get the giant soul, so you probably wouldn't have gotten that. In the Black Clutch, it's in such an obscure area because you have to fall down this cliff, and again, you can't really see it unless you really eyeball the fucking abyss, which you're not going to. You're not going to look down at the abyss where you're going to potentially die. You just think, I'm going to avoid that. That's where 2 are. And then the other 3 are fairly easy to find. They're not too bad. But for the most part, if you even just consume 1 or don't find 1, if you have 4 great souls in your inventory, he's going to be a pretty hard fight. Unless you cheese him, kind of like I did. I found like a little cheese where if you stand right behind him, he can never really hit you. But again, it's just very, very stupid. Another issue I had with the game, and I also touched on it a little bit earlier on, is everyone always tells me how strong mage builds are. I have never touched a mage build once. Like I say in every Souls-y video, every Souls type video I ever do, the one build I love to do is Dex, and not because it's overpowered. I'm a pure aesthetic guy. So I've never touched mage because I don't like the way mages look or they fight or whatever. But Dark Souls 1 I did a strength build, Dark Souls 2 I did a mage build, and Dark Souls 3, well, you guys can guess what it is. So I did my first ever mage build, and holy shit, this is the best worst game for a mage build ever, because when you go up against bosses, I actually think majority of bosses were a lot easier than they would be normally, because mage builds are pretty much strong against them, unless you go up against the blue Taurus demon in the Iron Keep DLC. He's extremely resistant to magic. But other than that, I found majority of the game, well, majority of the end game bosses and DLC bosses are super highly resistant to magic. But for the most part, majority of bosses are super easy. Where magic really falters, and I mean really falters, is against NPCs. If you go even past halfway through the game, and even if you have the Soul Spear, which is one of the strongest magic spells, you are not one-tapping any of the mobs. And the issue with one-tapping any of the mobs is, at no point in the game is there one mob running at you. There's always 3, 4. And like I said, they're running at you. So there's no real magic build that does an AoE damage apart from one that kind of does a swirl, but it does like no damage to any of the mobs. But if you have like there's like a missile one where you like hit it and then it just throws like a little projectile at them, because they run at you, and because of the way magic and height and the hitboxes work in the game, it always just goes right over the head. So other than bosses, which you're not going to spend as much time as you are going to spend in the overworld, you're just always at a disadvantage with mage builds. The other thing I hear about mage builds is that there is almost no boss weapons for mage builds. So if you haven't played Dark Souls 2, which I'm assuming you have, considering you clicked on this video, if you beat a boss, you get a boss's soul, which you can either consume for souls, or you can get a boss weapon for. I'm pretty sure out of the like 60 odd bosses that there are on the game, 40 something, I can't remember how many bosses there are on the game, I think 41. If I could remember properly, there's like 2 or 3 that give you a magic-based weapon, and even then, they're not, I actually don't think they're that good. So most of the time, you're just consuming souls, and then you see all these other weapons that are like heavier decks, and you think, oh, that actually looks really cool, but you're stuck with this shitty wand that you can't even get a really, like, a cooler one for, or a better one for, because none of the bosses give you it. And then probably the thing I hated from start to finish in the game is fall damage. You can actually trip over a rock and take half of your health off, because fall damage is insanely stupid. I literally fell from about this height in the game, and even though it wasn't much, it took off a shrapnel of my health, and I just thought, why? If you're at a boss for like 3 hours and you're extremely tilted and you see that much of your health go down, you would be super annoyed. And then there's one in particular, and I tested this out at the end of the series whenever it comes out on my main channel, but in the starting area of Majula, if you go down the well, there's a first platform that you could fall down, and I tested this out with, I think I had like 50 vigor or something like that. With the, did I have the fall ring? I think it was without the fall ring, but anyway, I had like 50 vigor, and it decimated like 60 to 70% of my health, and it's not that far of a drop. It genuinely isn't. Why they made fall damage in that game so unforgiving is so strange to me. The whole game just feels like, there's parts of the game where you look at it and you think this was really made with love. A lot of the areas are really good looking, and that's one of the things I said. I do love this game because I think a lot of the bosses are really cool. I think the areas are sensational. I think every bit of the game looks really, really cool. There isn't a bit in the game aesthetically where I think, oh god, that looks bad. They all look really cool, especially a lot of the DLCs. But then there's a whole other part of the game where it almost feels like they just couldn't be bothered to do it, or I'm going to sound like the Elden Ring DLC guys saying this, but it almost feels like they're just making the game hard to be hard. And I know that's weird coming from a Dark Souls 2 thing, but when people are saying, oh, Elden Ring is hard, but that's because the enemies are hard. Like, the enemies are tanky, the enemies hit hard, the enemies are quick, whatever. But when you have your magic spells going over someone's head, when you're locked on them, when you have taken a stupid amount of fall damage for absolutely no reason, and when you have these insanely long boss runs, which are essentially just going to chew away at your time more than anything, I think is so silly. But I don't want to end this off bad. The reason that this is a rant isn't because I hate the game. Like I said, I gave it the same score as I did Dark Souls 1, which is a 7.5. I am tossing and turning between 7.5 and 7, because I do think that Dark Souls 1 is slightly better. I'd maybe give Dark Souls 2 like a 7.4, 7.3. But I don't want this video just to be hate, because I do think that the game is really cool. There's a lot of cool magic spells. There's a lot of cool weapons. A lot of the bosses look great. Like I said, a lot of the areas are just grand and beautiful. A lot of the mobs are just really cool. A lot of the game is amazing, and the lore goes really hard. And I love and hate how big the game is. Some parts of the game feel more bloated than they should be, but when you get a game and it's so long, the same thing with Elden Ring, and it's just filled with so much lore and character creation and stuff like that, it's great. It's what every gamer wants, is a game that really just takes up as much time as possible, because you've put money into it. When you put money into it, you want as much content back, if not even more. Also, quick side note, because I forgot, there's a blacksmith that apparently is really important in the game. I didn't need to use him, but he's really important in the game. And in one of the areas, he goes, oh yeah, my nest is just down the road, and I was stuck on this for an hour. He was not down the road. He was 3, 4, even 5 maps deep into the game. And he said he's down the road. That is the most stupid placement for a mob I have ever seen, because not only is he not down the road, he's not hard to find within the map, but he's uncomfortable to find in the map, especially for me, because the area he's in is full of spiders, and I have insane arachnophobia. So if he's really important in the game and you have arachnophobia, Not only is he hard to find already, but you're gonna have an even harder time because you have loads of spiders around you. Like I said, this isn't shitting on the game. I actually really like the game. I'll probably go back and play it at some point. It's just frustratingly good, and a lot of the things that I said that were bad with the game pretty much just come towards the end of the game. It's like the latter part of the game, because I was really tempted to give it a comfortable same as Dark Souls 1, maybe even say it's better than Dark Souls 1 halfway through, but towards the end it just crumbled. Like, that game literally fell apart like it was a cracker. It was horrendous to see the game fall like that. Anyway, yeah, my little bitch rant is over. If you guys want to disagree with me, please tell me why. I'm always down for a conversation, but if you're just gonna go down to call me an idiot, well, fair enough. Anyway, that's all I wanted to talk about. Bye.